Welcome back to the Bryan Devore Connection. I am Bryan Devore. When it comes to looking for the right place for a senior to live, it can be a full-time job, and we don't know all the different possibilities that are out there, but there are people who do. They are placement professionals, and so I wanted to have one of my best friends come on the show today and talk about what it is that she does to help seniors, whether they're finding a home or maybe even staying home. So with me today is my friend Julie Derry. How are you doing, Julie?
Good. Thank you, Bryan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So, Julie, as you and I have talked about before, it could be a daunting task to do it, and you don't necessarily know all the different resources that are out there. So it's best really to hire a professional who does this, and you are a professional who does it. How did you get involved in this industry?
Yeah, so I actually was a marketing executive for many, many years, working in the digital space with large retailers. And as I built my career, I would move my brother, who has severe disabilities, and put him in a group home. And it was, as you said, I love the word daunting, right? It was a daunting task because you're responsible for someone's day-to-day life at that point. And so when I decided to do something different than being a marketing executive, right? It's like, I'm ready for a change. I want to give back to the community. I want to make a difference. And so I discovered that this is actually a profession where you can help people find the right location for their loved one. And with my experience with my brother, it just was a natural fit for me. And because I can empathize with the stress and the pressure and the just pure responsibility of choosing someone's day-to-day life. So that's what got me into it.
That's fantastic, and you love helping people.
I do.
I've oftentimes compared placement professionals to real estate agents in the sense that real estate agents help someone who's looking to buy a home, find a home, and it can be daunting, and you can look online, but that's not going to tell you the whole story. And it's certainly the same thing with placement professionals. You have built a company, Aging 123. So tell us about your company.
Yeah, so our company, Aging 123, and what we do is we want to meet people where they're at. And I mean that literally and figuratively, right? So we want to come to your home and see how you live, because that helps us better understand who you are and what's important to you. And in doing that, we can also have a conversation about what are your near-term goals, what are your longer-term goals, and in so doing, we can discover, are you set up to age in your own home, right? Because the vast majority, like 90% of people, depending upon the survey you read, about 90% of people want to stay home. So it's having that conversation, and we offer a home assessment where we can come in and do a thorough assessment of your home and provide a report of things that you could do that would allow for you to age in your own home, or age in place as it's called. Then we can also look at, and we do look at the option of going outside of the home and going into assisted living, and we talk about all the various options within assisted living. So we look at both, and that's I think that differentiates us from some of the other placement, because we do both. We recognize that there's a need to understand both options for families, and oftentimes families will need both options. They'll spend a period of time in their own home, and then maybe eventually they do need placement.
Yeah, and it's great that you do a multifaceted approach, because what I have found in working with seniors as well is they tend to oftentimes think near term or short term and aren't thinking necessarily long term. And so one of the studies that you and I talked about, 92% of people would prefer to age in place versus moving into an assisted living. The question is, can they? And are they set up for success to do so?
Exactly.
So just staying home doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get other things that they're going to necessarily need. So they need professionals to really guide them, not just for the near term, but for the short term as well. Yeah. One of the terms that you use, which I love, is one size fits one.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so what we do is, if you assume that like you in your lifetime, you'll probably go through the experience of finding assisted living or finding the right option for a loved one or for yourself, maybe say 1 to 3 times in your lifetime, right? We go through it hundreds of times a year, and so we've seen all the different permutations of what it takes to age in place and to move into assisted living. So what we want to do in the one size fits one is really get to know that individual and understand what their care needs are. But beyond their care needs, it's who are they and what's important to them. and to their family. And so once we understand that, then we can put together a plan of how to support them in what they want. And it's also, you know, it works for the family because they want their loved one to be happy, and they want to have it work for everyone. So that's what we're out to do. Is we spend quite a bit more time than say, like if you were to do an online survey, right? We spend quite a bit more time with the individual, really understanding who they are and what they need.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then when it does come time to look for a senior living community, I know there are some companies out there who, you know, you call them or go online and they'll send you a bunch of names, or a bunch of people will call, and to me it still feels like a little bit lost.
Yeah.
You know, you still don't really know which is the best option for you. But tell us a little bit about how you guide people when you are doing that.
Yeah, and it's so true. There's a heartbreaking story of a couple in their 80s that had got an online list and were out looking and got in a car accident, right?
Oh, wow.
And you can just imagine if you don't know the area, right? I mean, there's so much to it, and it's stressful in of itself to be out looking for assisted living. So what we do is we actually come to your home and pick you up. Now, if you want to meet us there, that works too. Or if you're going to have your adult children bring you, that's great. But we will come pick you up. In fact, as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to go pick up a client, and so pick them up at their home, and then that way they're freed up from any of the stress of driving, right? In Southern California, right? So they're freed up from the stress of driving, and then they get to see, right? They get to see, where do I park? Where's the entrance, right? All these things that they'd have to try to navigate on their own that we're able to do for them. And when we get to the community, we know the staff, we've been there numerous times, and so we're able to introduce them to the sales director and then navigate through the community with them and answer any questions, because now we have a very good understanding of our client, and we can assist our client in asking the questions that they have about the community.
Because they just won't know how to do that on their own. There's no way.
They won't. Yeah, and that's why, like I said, most people go through this, say, 1 to 3 times, and we go through it hundreds of times a year.
Right.
Yeah.
And you do see a point where people do want to age in place at home,
Yeah.
but they do need to make that transition into a senior living. How do you usually see that happening?
Yeah, so there's a couple things to look at, and one thing before I answer that question, I just want to clarify around assisted living, right? Because there's communities, I've mentioned communities, so you've got your large communities, but then you also have these residential care homes. And so in total in San Diego County, there's about 600 options. So that's one of the things we're able to do, is really understand what the best fit for that individual is, right? Because these residential care homes might be a better fit if someone is, they maybe keep to themselves, and they're not interested in the amenities and the activities of a large community. Maybe they like to stay in their own room and read or watch TV, and they're not going to take advantage of what a community has to offer. Or if their care needs are very high. If their care needs are very high, they might be better suited for a residential care home where the caregiver to resident ratio is much better. So you have 6 residents and 2 caregivers, right, versus a larger community. So if your care needs are very high, it might be a better fit. So we can assess all of that. The other thing, going back to your question with that transition from being in home to assisted living, it really, oftentimes it becomes a math exercise, because when you start to bring in care in home, right, in-home care, the cost of in-home care right now is about $30 an hour. So at $30 an hour, you're going to pretty quickly get to the cost of what it would be for 24-hour care in an assisted living. So we'll go through that math exercise with the family as we're discussing what the options are.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Speaking of family,
Cents.
Yeah, exactly, dollars and cents.
Yeah.
Speaking of family, you and I have talked about this before too. You have caregiver burnout, and I believe the statistic is about 30% of people who are caring for a loved one actually pass away before the loved one does. So talk about care for the caregiver.
Yeah, one of the first things I do when I meet a spouse or partner that is, and this is, most often it's the spouse has dementia, right? And so I'll be what's called the well spouse. I'll be working with the well spouse to find something for the person with dementia. And one of the first things I'll do is I'll ask them, how are you doing? And I can't tell you how many times, I'd say well over half the time, they just break down. right then and there in tears, because it's so incredibly stressful. And until you've been in that situation and you understand the day-to-day stress, when you're not getting the sleep that you would normally get, maybe your nutrition is compromised, certainly your exercise is compromised, it takes its toll on you. And yeah, so the statistic is 30% of the time the person providing care does pass. And I also share this with adult children because it is such a sobering statistic. I want them to know, because oftentimes they'll just say, oh, mom will just take care of them. It's like, look, you need to know this is, this will take its toll over time. And there are great resources in the community that when we're talking about in-home care and somebody staying home, bringing in-home care, there are things that we can do. There are daycare programs for people with dementia. So there are things that we can do to allow for someone to stay at home as long as possible, but we really have to be looking at the family caregiver as well and making sure they're being taken care of.
Yeah, well, certainly it's a very holistic approach, looking out for the caregiver, aging in place, moving to a community. There's a lot to think about. So like we started saying from the beginning, you need a professional who's going to guide you the whole way. Yeah. And that's why you're here.
Yeah.
So.
And one thing I would just add to that is to use a professional, right? Most of us, it's a free to family service. We get compensated through our network of providers. So for the family, there's no charge. And look for a professional that has a certification. So there are people, a couple of things I would call out is the National Referral and Placement Alliance, and look for placement agents that are a part of that alliance, and look for certified senior advisors, because those two certifications show that the person is a professional and is following a best practices and a code of ethics.
Absolutely, 100%. In any industry, you want to work with someone who's going to be the best of the best.
Yeah.
So, great. Julie, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And please reach out to Julie if you need any assistance in this respect. Her contact information is on screen, and she'd be glad to talk with you and give you all the information you're going to need to help make the best decisions for you and your family. Thanks again.